You want to be a Toys R Us kid. That was the fantasy. Walking through those automatic doors into what felt like an entire universe built for children. Endless aisles, giant shelves, toys stacked higher than your parents. Every birthday wish sitting somewhere under fluorescent lights. For millions of kids, Toys R Us wasn't just a store. It was childhood. And then, almost overnight, it disappeared. In 2017, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy. By 2018, nearly 900 stores across America were gone. 30,000 employees lost their jobs. One of the most recognizable retail brands in the world collapsed in front of everyone. But here's what makes the story strange. Kids never stopped wanting toys. Parents never stopped buying them. The toy industry itself was still massive. So how does the company that dominated toy retail for decades suddenly implode? Most people think Amazon killed Toys R Us. That's only part of the story. Because by the time Amazon became a real threat, Toys R Us was already bleeding from the inside. The real story starts in 2005, when a group of private equity firms bought the company in one of the most destructive leveraged buyouts in retail history. The kingdom of childhood. To understand the collapse, you have to understand what Toys R Us actually was. The company was founded in 1948 by Charles Lazarus, a young entrepreneur who noticed something simple but powerful. Parents will always spend money on their children, even during recessions, even during hard times. Families might cut vacations, restaurants, or new clothes, but they would still buy something for their kids. So Lazarus built an entirely new kind of store around that idea. Not a toy aisle inside a department store. An entire warehouse dedicated to toys. Massive selection. Lower prices. One destination. By the 1980s and 90s, Toys R Us controlled nearly 25% of the entire U.S. toy market. Suppliers depended on them. Competitors feared them. And that success created a dangerous illusion that something so iconic could never disappear. The first crack. The first real threat didn't come from Amazon. It came from Walmart and Target. They changed the economics of toys completely. Walmart could sell toys at razor-thin margins, sometimes barely making money on them at all, because families shopping for toys were also buying groceries, clothes, and electronics. Toys R Us couldn't do that. Toys were the entire business. Suddenly, Toys R Us was competing against companies that could afford to care less about profit on toys than they could. And while that pressure was building, another threat was already arriving. The Internet. The Amazon mistake. In 2000, Toys R Us faced a major decision: build a serious e-commerce operation or find a shortcut. It chose the shortcut. The company partnered with Amazon, giving it exclusive rights to sell Toys R Us products online. Amazon had the technology. Toys R Us had the brand and inventory. Together, they were supposed to dominate online toy retail. But Amazon allowed other toy sellers onto the platform anyway, violating the exclusivity agreement. Toys R Us sued and won, but the damage was already done. While Amazon was learning how online retail worked, Toys R Us wasn't building its own digital infrastructure. It was in court, and in retail, standing still is the same thing as falling behind. By the time the lawsuit ended, Amazon wasn't just another retailer. It was becoming the future of retail itself. And Toys R Us was years behind. But even that wasn't the real killing blow. The deal that destroyed the company. In 2005, Toys R Us was purchased by Bain Capital, KKR, and Vornado Realty Trust in a $6.6 billion leveraged buyout. The investors didn't use their own money to buy the company. They borrowed most of it, then transferred that debt directly onto Toys R Us itself. The company, in effect, bought itself, and then spent years trying to pay for its own purchase. Overnight, Toys R Us was buried under more than $5 billion in debt. Every single year, hundreds of millions of dollars that could have gone toward modernizing stores, improving delivery, or competing online went instead toward interest payments. While Amazon built one of the most advanced logistics networks in history, Toys R Us was servicing debt. While Target modernized its stores, Toys R Us was paying interest. While retail transformed around them, Toys R Us became financially frozen. Industries changing this fast punish companies that can't adapt. And debt removed Toys R Us' ability to adapt. The collapse. In September 2017, Toys R Us filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At first, many believed the company would survive. The brand still mattered. Kids still wanted toys. But bankruptcy exposed how fragile the company had become. Suppliers got nervous. Inventory tightened. And retail runs on confidence. Once suppliers stop trusting you, shelves start emptying. Customers notice. Sales fall further. The cycle feeds itself. By March 2018, the decision was final. Full liquidation. Every store would close. What followed felt strangely emotional for a retail bankruptcy. Adults posted childhood photos. Parents brought their kids to closing sales not just to buy toys, but to say goodbye. News cameras filmed empty aisles and Jeffrey the giraffe statues being wheeled out for the last time. It didn't feel like people were mourning a company. It felt like they were mourning a version of childhood that no longer existed. The part most people miss. People say Amazon killed Toys R Us. But Amazon was the accelerant. The fire had already started years earlier. The people who owned Toys R Us needed the company to generate cash fast enough to justify the buyout. The company itself needed time and investment to reinvent itself. Those two goals were never compatible. And in the end, finance won. The toy industry survived. The customers survived. The demand survived. Toys R Us didn't. Today, millions of adults who once wandered those aisles buy toys for their own kids on their phones, delivered the next morning by the very system that replaced it. Toys R Us didn't die because the world stopped wanting toys. It died because the people controlling it had very different priorities than the people who loved it. If you want more stories about iconic companies, cities, and systems that looked unstoppable right before they collapsed, like and subscribe.